Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 12th of October, 2022, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, myself, Brian Gerrish, and I'm delighted to be joined by David Scott, reporting from Jerusalem. We're also joined by Alex Thompson, who is back in the UK, and we've got our very own Debbie Evans, nursing correspondent, who will be talking to us from the depths of Cornwall. Well, we're going to kick off straight away with really the continued chaos in the financial and economic system. And of course, we've now still got trouble with bonds and bond purchases. So, David, I'm going to bring you in straight away. You're overseas at the moment, but clearly keeping a watchful eye on what's happening with matters to do with money and the bond markets.
Money in the bond markets, and it's blowing up in Britain in the Bank of England, but it's the same threats and stresses are visible the world over. So here we see the Financial Times reporting that the Bank of England, as we predicted just a few weeks ago, are going to prolong their bond purchases. So officials have indicated that they're having a flexible approach if market volatility flares up. Despite Bailey warning there's only 3 days left of Bank of England money printing and bond purchases to support the market. This is related to problems in the insurance and pensions industries. Bailey, speaking at an event organised by the Institute of International Finance, said that the central bank intervention would be out by the end of the week.
Right. David, just for viewers who might not be terribly au fait with matters to do with bonds issuing of bonds and what it's all about, just a few seconds, explain to us what is actually going on here and why we should pay attention to all matters around.
Yes, it shows the strain that the whole financial system is under. It's come from zero interest rate policy. So to support the economy after the big crash and through COVID, interest rates were set at essentially zero. Pension funds and others couldn't get a return, so had to go basically taking on risk and taking on more exotic ways of getting a return, all of which were heavily leveraged off of Bank of England debt, UK government debt, treasury debt, gilts and such like. Now that the price of that debt is going down, this leaves all the pension funds and other financial organisations with a huge problem. They're being hit by margin calls. They've got to make up their losses. They don't have enough cash, and they're running around to try and find it. And the Bank of England is helpfully printing a good deal of it, buying more UK government debt on the free market to put liquid cash into the institutions that are now under strain. So that's what's happening. One banker here, the Financial Times reports, said if the market gets into trouble, they will have to open the program again. So this is in response to Bailey saying that after 3 days we're closing this program down. And this banker is quite rightly saying that that's not true. He said that making strong comments as he did only creates a much bigger cliff edge, only creates more tension. But the issue is, if the market fails, they have to print. They have to do more quantitative easing. It's the only tool they've got. That's where we've got to.
Right, okay. And of course, in all these things, pensions are of great interest to a great many people, but it would appear pensions are not entirely safe either.
A lot of this relates to pensions, and if you have a pension and you think that you're entirely safe in this system, you're wrong. There's a huge risk of big losses there. Whether the people who have paid in all of their lives to pensions will ever see a penny remains to be seen.
Okay, and we had a headline here, the Naked Emperor's newsletter, financial crash, Bank of England warns pension funds, you've 3 days left to rebalance. So this is the details starting to come out now.
Yeah, this was a piece that Alex had spotted covering the same area, but quite an astute sort of commentary piece on this. Perhaps Alex would like to say a few words.
Yes, if we keep that on screen a moment, you can see in the middle that it is the purchasing of index-linked gilts, which is at the heart of this problem with the pension funds' liquidity. Index-linked gilts, as we read in the final sentence on screen, are another product typically held by pension funds, which are the source of all the panic. And the Bank of England has warned of a material risk to UK financial stability. And there's a couple of graphs to go with the Naked Emperor's newsletter to show the yield on 10-year bonds. So this is an indication of it goes the wrong way, a counterintuitive way. The higher it is, the less confidence. David will correct me if I get this wrong, but the higher this index is, the less yes, he's nodding, that's correct. The less confidence there is in the market. So you can see that shooting up. There's a further graph for a 30-year bond. This is before the Bank of England intervention at the beginning or last week. Yes, the beginning of this week now. And then there's a bit more text as well if you tap that again, indicating that the pension fund trade body basically told Bailey to have another think, to catch himself on, as they say in some parts of the country, when he'd told pension fund managers in Washington, D.C. that we'll be out by Friday. I had to cut out the bottom of the screen because this being a blog spot, or a Substack blog, there's some ripe language, but basically the accurate summary here by the Naked Emperor, the blogger, is that the markets told Bailey, you are under our control. So the final graphic, if you tap once more, will show, can you guess at which point Bailey made his comments and the market responded? So I'll hand back to David on that because he may have some comments on the graphs.
Alex, just briefly.
Sorry, that's the cable rate. That's the pounds to dollar rate rather than a bond yield on screen at the moment.
Okay, Alex, if I can just interject there. Very interesting. We got discussions about who controls Bailey. And this, of course, is one of the points I was making a few days ago when we were talking about the Bank of England. Is the government in control of the Bank of England, or are other people in control of the Bank of England? Who controls Bailey?
I think that's one for David, although I do know that it is perennially debated. At the moment, there's a polite conversation going on between Rainer Fulmich and Rodney Atkinson over this very question, who holds the whip hand in the City of London. But David is dying to come in on this point.
Yes, I mean, this is the hole that Bailey and the Bank of England have dug for themselves. And the Bank of England is ultimately controlled by the Treasury, but none of these people are in control of anything anymore because they've printed money, they've puffed up the economy, they've caused a bubble in almost everything, and the only thing that's keeping it up is continued money printing. The minute they stop, things start to collapse. They cannot endure the collapse. Therefore, they have to keep money printing. So I think you're possibly being optimistic, Brian, if you think anybody is in control now. If you imagine an oil tanker with everyone on the bridge dead, and it's heading towards like a pier or a rocky coastline, that's about where we're at.
That's about where we're at. And of course, the result is in soft ground, it ends up about 3 miles inland before the momentum dissipates. You've been having a look at Financial Times and Lebanon as your in area, as it were. What have you got here?
Yes, I picked this up in the local press and then went hunting for it. So Lebanon's adjusting its currency peg. For 25 years, it's been pegged to the dollar at 1,507 Lebanese pounds to the dollar. Right, so they're having a small adjustment. Kind of, right? The adjustment is to take it from 1,507 to 15,000 Lebanese pounds to the dollar. So that lets you know how Lebanon's currency has been doing of late. But it's a little more complicated than that. So if you go to the next slide, this is Al Monitor. This is a Middle East news site. And they're reporting that, yes, we're going to shift the official lira rate, but it's not quite in one phase. It's in two phases. So first, we're going to shift the official exchange rate for everything to do with taxes, because this will increase government revenue. But we're not going to shift the rate for anything to do with banks. So the banks get to value their assets and liabilities at 1,507 liras or pounds to the dollar. The people who pay taxes have to pay taxes based on 15,000 liras or pounds to the dollar. And if you perhaps caught on the Financial Times, the first piece we showed there, it says what the black market rate is, which is the free market rate. That's 38,500 Lebanese pounds to the dollar. So if you're an ordinary person and you want a dollar, it's going to cost you 38,500. Right? If you're paying your taxes, and it's 15,000, but if you're a bank, it's 1,507. So it's an interesting example of the fact that we're all equal, but some are more equal than others.
David, my immediate thought is: does the Lebanon Central Bank, is it involved with the Bank of International Settlements? I can't remember from the list of, I think it was 63 of the world's national banks that are involved with the Bank of International Settlements, Bank for International Settlements hand, but I wonder whether they've got a finger in this pie as well. I think that'll take a little bit more research. Well, Alex, sorry, David, do you want to come back?
No, I don't have that information for you at the moment, but I'll try and get that for you.
Okay. Well, Alex, I think you're going to take us on to matters in Germany here. So alongside financial and economic troubles, we've got energy problems. What are you picking up from the German side?
Well, Greta Thunberg, who is, I think, still technically a teenager, has been talking to Die Welt, which has a little more honest reporting than the rest of the German mainstream media, but that's not saying much. And here she has been carried by other foreign rebroadcasters of this information, tongue in cheek, as having said, "I give you permission, Germany, to not to switch off your nuclear power stations." Signed, Greta. So the headline here is a bit more equivocal than that. It says Greta Thunberg calls it a mistake for Germany to be considering turning off its nuclear power stations. But she's very much in control. And this is actually a rewrite by Die Welt of a behind a paywall piece in the magazine Der Stern, which was mentioned in the leak that we still have on the front page of ukcolumn.org as one of the key collaborating bodies in the German mainstream media, getting the message right on Russia and Ukraine. And I had to leave this in because I thought either Brian or Debbie would almost certainly have a comment on this one eye of Greta covered in an oil slick illustration. And the headline of this behind a paywall interview in Der Stern, which was written up by Die Welt on the previous slide, is, quote, "It's funny that people think of me as a raging teenager who can't laugh." But she's not laughing there. And I do wonder about her state of health posing for coverage like that.
Yes, and it's an interesting question altogether when we have, I'm going to call her a child, right? She may be just moving into adulthood, but essentially we have a child. Apparently the world should be paying attention to what a child thinks about some very complicated situations. Debbie, we've mentioned this young lady before, but she's being used, isn't she?
Yeah, 100%. And you know that picture that you just saw with the black gloop over it, I think this is following a theme, because I think there have been other fairly well-known names who have posed for similar pictures with this black gloop over them, which seems to be a pretty dark sign. And yes, of course, I mean, anybody that's coming out with what she's coming out with and has been from a very early age is definitely being maneuvered and groomed into a position. And you know, on one hand, people despise her. Many people despise her and what she said, and on the other hand, many people welcome what she says and treat her as some kind of heroine. So for me, she's, as what Alex said right at the very beginning, she's a teenager. She is still a teenager.
Okay, we'll leave her in that bracket then, and the tantrums that go with it. So, David, you got very interested, and you've got a video clip here of somebody, well, I was going to say somebody else throwing their toys out the pram, I think, but maybe they're justified. What is this one about?
I think they're justified. This is Tulsi Gabbard. Now, we've covered her quite a bit some time ago because she was a candidate for the nomination for president for the Democratic Party. She was chasing that prize along with Biden et al. And she wasn't successful, but she was in the race for quite a long time. So she's a serious and important politician in the Democratic Party in America, or rather, she was. She was always a bit of an outlier because she was anti-war. And the reason we liked her is she was speaking out against warmongering and against policies that simply promoted more war and not more peace. Well, she's had enough, and she's left the Democratic Party, and this is her brief summary as to why.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Well, David,
Wasn't that magnificent?
that's quite some speech. It does seem that we've got cracks appearing in the establishments, whether it's in the US or UK or indeed in Europe. And people who are starting to break ranks need some encouragement if they're not only saying the right things, but doing the right things alongside it.
Now, this is building on a previous campaign where people were saying just walk away from the Democrats. But that list, serving the elite, unrestrained wokeness, anti-white racism, hostile to faith, protecting criminals, believing in open borders, and promoting war. That is quite a list, because most of those would apply to a very large part of the political spectrum in the UK.
Okay, well, if that's some speaking out that we've just seen, a number of people flagged up to the UK column, an MEP, Rob Rose, speaking out, and we're going to show this video straight